Alrighty, I'll start over. So on the left-hand side, so we're here today. Oh, there's Kevin. Cool. Welcome, Kevin. Um, we're gonna talk about demand gen for the OpenAPI specification. I mean, this forum is meant to be pretty wide. It could be anybody coming talking about any topic or issue. I'm not overly concerned with what folks are interested in talking about. I'll help corral that hopefully a little bit, but the core of this is about demand generation. How do we get more people talking about OpenAPI as a spec? How to get people understanding what it does, and then amplify that by getting people to help do a lot of this for us. We should, demand gen is very social media oriented, GitHub oriented in this case, and so how do we get people doing things alongside of us and beating that drum alongside of us and getting the word of mouth going. And then this all rolls into ask in the conference and how we can get, keep the voices building from that. So everyone kind of came together in the OAI and pulled together a sheet, a Google sheet, and we've been dumping ideas into it for about a week now. I've moved those to GitHub. They're here on the left-hand side. I just have this in a personal repo for OAI, but I'll be slowly kind of formalizing and creating a page for this meeting, have a link to these ideas and any other resources. I'll be using this repo as kind of a central place for that. But the goal is just get as many ideas on the table over the next couple of weeks, flesh out those ideas the best we can, kind of identify the overlaps between them and what they are, and then see what we can't run with and what we can't get people to help own and do. And in part of my work back at Postman, so you're actually looking at an internal Postman page here, but I'm not giving away any super secrets here. This is just public research that I'm doing that I want to contribute to this conversation. And this was involved basically doing a search on GitHub for Swagger. And when I search for Swagger on GitHub, you come up with a bunch of repositories that have Swagger artifacts or Swagger tools in them. I've sorted those and organized them by the type of tool. And so basically kind of organizing and saying this is what people are interested in because they're building open source tools for OpenAPI. And so these topics really feed into demand generation. This is an echo, a representation of the demand that people have for the OpenAPI currently. And I'll zoom in a little bit there. So, Spring, Java, that's a pretty big one. Documentation is pretty key. Documentation's the original Swagger sin, we'll call it that. Generating Swagger and OpenAPI, CLI, and then just on code gen and whatnot. And then I have down here, after the top 100 kind of keywords, I have kind of the brands and platforms that they're building on. And then I have various languages, and then I have the repos themselves that I've organized, and they're sorted by the ones who have the most stars and the most forks and the most watchers all combined. And so these are actually open source tools that are being built on Swagger. And then I did that for OpenAPI as well. And so OpenAPI is a little bit different. There's kind of a diff between them, but again, this is the demand generation for this is what's in demand for OpenAPI. So how do we use this? I'm reaching out. I'm building lists of companies who are behind these tools or people, and I'm reaching out to these groups as part of just general outreach with Postman. And what I'm trying to build community, identify these who's doing them. Fast API, Redoc. I know the people there, and then understand what's going on here and try to see, is there an opportunity for them to tell stories about what they're doing as part of OAI marketing, demand gen, and then the reverse. Are there opportunities for them to get involved with OAI messaging and ask and other things. So I'm kind of working my way down this list right now, and I'll combine this research. I'll pull it out here into the GitHub repo and share it with everyone publicly as I'm cultivating it, to help further drive conversations. But the goal is with this demand gen is go beyond what the marketing meeting can do, because the marketing meeting is very internal. Here's what we can do. Demand gen is going to be very, very social, very public, and about getting all of these players to the table and having a conversation about what's possible. So that's kind of the summary of where I'm at right now. I'll just kind of pause there and then just open it up for conversations, and let's what else can we do?
Any ways to measure like success of the reach?
Yeah, good question. So I wouldn't say I'm to that point yet where I'm thinking of that, but I'm mapping out the scope of the landscape. So what is that reach potential right now? And I have to admit, part of this is that diff between Swagger and OpenAPI. There's still that reach is greater in the Swagger world than it is in the OpenAPI world. And so mapping that landscape and then coming up with some metrics for how we quantify what is success when it comes to demand gen, what is, who are we reaching out to, how are we, what's that impact? I think that'll come here soon.
Right, okay.
So as I mentioned early on, I'm just going to keep beating this drum each week. What I'm going to be doing is doing this research as part of what I do in that Postman, kind of our wider open source and partner outreach. And then I'm going to overlap it with this demand gen effort. And I'll just keep telling stories on API Evangelist. I'll keep Twitter active. I'll keep this meeting. And then I'm going to move to 8 a.m. in the morning on Fridays, which not everyone's going to like, but it will open us. I have people from Europe and from Southeast Asia that want to join, so that'll open up a little wider. And then I'll just keep driving this forward as I know how to do until we get some more ideas on the table, we get some more momentum and people behind. But like I've already got a few people just from starting to stir this, a couple of open source tooling companies who are looking for more exposure. And I really want to come up with a way to get them involved in demand gen, get them tweeting, get them blogging, get them generating OpenAPI content about what they're doing, and then find ways that I can reciprocate that on API Evangelist, on the OAI side, and then across potentially other people that we get involved in demand gen. So the goal is to just really kind of map this landscape, define what success and what the reach across that landscape would be, and then just take this week by week and see where we can take it.
Sure. And if there's some kind of hard to follow the tweet streams to retweet, if there's anything that you would like tweeted, I've got a few accounts, maybe send it out to the group. Say, hey, please retweet this if you get a chance or something. That's one possible idea to increase social media exposure.
I like that.
I certainly would, and
Yeah, having templates. I would say having a rolling wave of like, here's what's going on, and like I can't remember this one company that pinged me yesterday, their name, but things that we should be amplifying as a group. And like yesterday, I retweeted a kid who just finished his first OpenAPI definition, and he's like admitted, he doesn't have a big audience, and probably no one's going to hear this, but he was really excited about finishing his OpenAPI spec and getting over the hump. So like, how do we as a network help amplify that so other people go, oh, well, and so showcasing from the lowest levels like that on the ground to showcasing each of these open source tools. I think if we can have that. Where's the best channel? Because this is not an OAI Slack. I'm wondering, Neil, what would be the best channel for these kinds of real-time communications? Can we do a Slack channel that's wider, or should I come up with some other formula?
Yeah, that's a good question. By the way, I was multitasking, so I just started to pay attention in the last few seconds. So I may have missed some of your context. But we do have. We could potentially do something with Slack. We haven't really pushed our Slack, the way we have for the official OpenAPI Slack, we do have a little bit of a policy thing, which is that if people want to join and they're not part of an OpenAPI member, they are only supposed to be allowed to join the spec channel for the technical discussions,
Yeah.
and not the other channel. So that could be a limitation of the Slack. We potentially could have a different Slack. We do have, and I'm sure you know this already, but I hear what you're saying. It may not be good for open communications. I do have access to the API specifications Twitter channel and the API, which is the conference, and also the OpenAPI Twitter channel, just FYI. And we have a LinkedIn channel group. So it's a good question. I don't know, but I just thought I'd mention those.
Well, I'm thinking, just building off Robert's ideas, so it might be worthwhile having a specific demand gen Twitter account for this kind of automated, because I wouldn't want to pollute the main channels with this kind of activity noise. But like, I'm monitoring the hashtag for OpenAPI, and when someone does something interesting or I could retweet it using that account, and then that would basically send the signal to, the bat signal to the rest of the demand gen group, and people could follow that and then follow that lead. And that would be the kind of demand gen seed maybe for this kind of echo or amplification network.
Gotcha.
Yeah, that'd make a lot more sense. And then thinking about how, I don't know, I would have to really think about this in terms of reciprocity from everyone, in this community. Like, so if you're a company that has an open source tool and you tweet something interesting, I tweet it and we amplify it. Like, how do we keep scratching each other's backs and doing that and surfacing things so that they're getting love from us as a network and from the OAI, but then we're ensuring, and tracking somehow. And I would say this goes back to Robert, to the reach metrics and kind of reach definition is, all right, what do we expect of you? If we're retweeting your story, I'd love to see some sort of, reciprocity there of you being active and you doing X, Y, or Z. And I'm doing this as part of Postman's wider partner program because, we have a lot of people who want to partner with us, and kind of setting the bar. And I would say there's kind of the same here with the demand gen for this is, how do we set the bar of participation that, hey, you're going to get love from the group and we're going to amplify you. We expect some sort of network reciprocity on your end. So let me put some thought into that. I think that would be a good first. So I'm out of all of these idea projects, I'm looking for ones that are ones we can get going now, ones that are, low hanging fruit and low friction, and maybe I can just champion and run forward. So the first idea on the list was holding this office hours, and I'm just doing it, and I'm just going to own it and run with it. I would say this Twitter account for tracking and defining what demand gen is, and then start coming up with a reach definition, what it would look like for this group. I think that's a second project that I can do, I can own, and I can run with, and it'll significantly help us achieve our goals. So I'm going to go ahead and add that to the list and take ownership of it and just run with it. And then just keep doing this week to week and see what comes up. Any other thoughts? No? Because I'll keep talking. And you guys ain't gonna chime in, because that's how I work.
So just one suggestion. If like as a part of these calls, if you could just, for new members, just elaborate on what OpenAPI is and what we like trying to achieve at an OpenAPI like coalition membership level. So that will also probably excite people to join OpenAPI community on the whole.
I like that. I like that, and I like the idea of making every time I hold one of these meetings that I dedicate the first 5 minutes to that, and kind of develop that as a ritual. Because so one thing I love about you, Vineet, is you're like no BS about saying, hey, what do you mean by that? I do not get that. And so doing that, I think, as a ritual for everybody, and not assuming everyone knows what OpenAPI is when they jump on this call, And when they get on board, I think that's critical.
Yeah, cool.
So with that said, I'm going to give you my first crack at what is OpenAPI and why is it important? Because this is actually part of the blog post that I owe Neil here for the OpenAPI blog as part of our release next week for Postman. So, so OpenAPI is a specification for defining the surface area of your API. So it's a specification, meaning it's got a set of common patterns that you can describe using JSON or YAML to describe how to make a request to your API and what that response that you can get back is. And in Postman, we use the OpenAPI specification to define API. So if you have an API and you're a Postman user, you can import or create a new OpenAPI and then start defining the characteristics of your API. And then we use that to generate a collection and publish documentation that then becomes the actual representation of what your API does, and actually articulates it and describes it to people. So that's really that was the early aha moment with OpenAPI, is if you maintain a definition, an OpenAPI for your API, you can automatically generate documentation for end users with it. But you can also do so much more. You can generate mocks, you can generate code that helps people get up and running with it. You can do security scans. There's a whole bunch of things that you can do with the OpenAPI. Our biggest challenge in demand gen is helping people understand what this is. What is an OpenAPI? What is it for? And how is it used? And I would say, back to my screen here, the Postman side, that's kind of what I'm digging into here. This list here on the right, these are what people do with the OpenAPI definition. They generate the OpenAPI, they work within the CLI, they work to build clients, as I mentioned, documentation, they generate servers, they work with data. There's quite a few things that they do with these open APIs. But over the last decade, open APIs become central to how large organizations define their APIs and put them to use. Now, our biggest challenge with open API is the last version, major versions, 2.0, was actually called Swagger. And Swagger, it's a long story I won't go into. That'll be another subject that we should talk about. But Swagger is the last version since it got put into the Linux Foundation, or the OAI, Open API Initiative, which is within the Linux Foundation. It's got renamed to Open API. So there's a whole bunch of people who think it's called Swagger, and when they say Swagger, they mean Open API. And that's part of the challenge of this demand gen group, I think, is to help really drown out, I'm going to be honest about it, drown out the Swagger conversation with the Open API, and then let people know they should be having an Open API conversation. So I don't think I did you justice there, Vineet, but I'm going to keep working on that, and I'm going to give that talk to you probably 3 or 4 more times, and I need your feedback on how well I'm doing.
Sure, and thank you so much for that. That was, as in context, was super helpful. And as in a baby's sort of crying, so I have to jump off today, but I'm super excited about this, and we'll look forward to future calls.
Thank you. You're on the invite. Jump in whenever you have time. Have a good weekend.
You too. Bye-bye.
So, Ken, you mentioned part of the demand gen issue is really conversion, going from Swagger folks to having them adopt OpenAPI, probably not only as a specification, but in the language and the documentation and all of that. In terms of sort of new adoption and and generating demand for OpenAPI, I don't know what exists today for OAI marketing initiatives, but do we have a sense of what kind of profiles might describe folks who are using this? Are we clearly there's a developer market here, but is there anything that's ever been targeted towards ops or ops-related projects that are increasingly using REST APIs? Anything like that?
Great question. So I'm see if I can find it in my notebook without giving you guys too much of my notebook away. But I have a list of roles that I'm trying to flesh out as part of this, so that reminds me to put it in as part of this group. Where did it go? I don't see it. You guys get a look through my notebook here real quick and see all my dirty stuff. No, but I have a list of roles, and it's based upon the data that we do with this data, the API report that Postman does, and then going through and identifying which ones are technical versus or developer versus non-developer roles. Obviously a back-end developer is 100% a developer role, but ops people, evangelists, DevRel, like sales analysts, us giving them a percentage, how much developer versus non-developer are they, and then start thinking about how would they touch an OpenAPI definition, like at what point. So if they're testing in Q&A, right here, they're generating tests or doing it, and then so really kind of trying to understand that. I don't think there's any good data out there as far as who those people are, and I think there was a lot of promise. I remember this around OpenAPI going from JSON when we introduced YAML, saying, hey, now non-developers, it's going to make sense to them, and I've never ever seen any evidence of that. So I think there's a lot of work on a demand gen side to go, okay, who are these people? What are their roles? How are they touching OpenAPI? And then there is within the OAI, there's an education effort going, kind of jump starting, and there's a getting started, official getting started guide being made right now. And so how do you start mapping that kind of getting started and education items to these roles so that people actually learn about OpenAPI in the way that speaks to how they're going to use it and how it matters to their job.
Great. Yeah, I was just thinking in terms of, targeted blog content. Should we be going after folks in various parts of the industry? Even, of course, things are strange with it now, but even conferences and, should we be looking outside the normal stream of conferences we typically go to and trying to reach a broader audience, that sort of thing?
Yep, that's one of the ideas here. Actually, Steve threw up more sponsorship of non-API tech events. And so yeah. I just got these on GitHub, and I'm going to go through and kind of flesh some of them out and try to get some more meat on them bones.
Okay, great. Yeah, I know being in the API space, most of these events are me hanging out with my friends, right? So it's not, there are occasionally new people who come in, but there's certainly a much wider audience out there worth evaluating.
Yeah, no, and who, I think that's the thing that the Postman State of the API report, the claim it makes is, this is a widening audience, meaning there are new roles and there are new, ways those roles are being applied across business and different industries. So who are those people and why should they care about OpenAPI? Now I'll admit as part of this, for Postman especially, but we need to think about it as a wider OAI, is there's a lot before someone gets to what is OpenAPI and why should I care, including what is an API and why should I care. So I think we have to look at wider literacy. I think this list that I'm building right now is very much the developer class, but I think as we develop the roles and do the diff, we come up with content and topics and perspectives that matter to non-developers and that wider audience.
Just to share, go ahead. Just to share, as part of the OpenAPI group, earlier this year, very early before the pandemic hit, we were analyzing a list of events that were developer-oriented, thinking about events we could attend and maybe be a part of or participate in we're developer oriented, but not specifically API events, like you mentioned. And so, for example, language specific events, a Go event or something like that, where we could reach developers, very developer centric, but not really thinking so much about open APIs at this point. Whether Go, Rust, current Java events, whatever they might be, I think there's some complementary spaces where we probably don't have a presence where it makes sense to have one. Just kind of, we have thought through some of that. We made a list of some of those events. Those have since been canceled, but we still have them. There's some ideas about some places. Various developer communities that exist out there, as kind of a springboard to non-developer. Because I agree, that's still kind of a tough place to hit. With OpenAPI at this point. If you're not as technical or a developer, I haven't seen any real success with that myself either. Anyway, just throwing out some ideas that we have. We can share some of that as well.
Yeah, I'll definitely want to tap into that research because that's exactly where we want to be going. Did you have something else you want to say, Kevin?
Yeah, I'm just wondering, most of the OpenAPI stuff I see is definitely geared toward the developer, but most of the conversations I have in organizations where it's really starting to spread, the folks that I'm speaking to are, they're either VPs or they're in enterprise architecture. So I'm wondering if you have anything sort of geared towards that enterprise architecture team who can say things like, we have mandates, not only are we using OpenAPI, but there's our governance around that. Even anything like, hey, I'm an OpenAPI developer, how do I sell OpenAPI to my enterprise architecture team? I'm wondering if there's any content around that we have now that we can leverage, or this would be sort of new territory.
Yeah, all great questions. I think from my experience, there's a lot of ad hoc kind of miscellaneous content, people like me and others from talks, from conferences talking about these topics to a specific audience. But I don't think in terms of organized content that we can point people to, we can reiterate and enhance and keep amplifying. No, it doesn't exist.
And if I'm understanding that right, it sounds like a way for people to understand the value of the OpenAPI initiative, the value of specification, or
I mean, what Kevin and what we're just saying about the going out to other events. I mean, there's kind of several spheres to this onion. Is the dev conference and the language conferences going outside of just the API echo chamber forces us to speak to what OpenAPI solves, the problems it solves, not just talking about the OpenAPI spec for the sake of OpenAPI spec and assuming everyone's going to care about it, because no one does. And developers just want problem solved for them. So we have to talk about docs, we have to talk about the mocks, we have to talk about all the tooling, and that's why this tooling research is so critical. And then the second layer of that onion is going out to non-developer conferences. Like, can we go to a real estate tech conference and float, and stay afloat with some sort of message? That's like forces you even further out of your comfort zone and create content that speaks to business users on why OpenAPI matters. And that all really pushes us out of our comfort zone and forces us having to create content that speaks to those.
Yeah, well, what's the business case for OpenAPI?
Precisely.
I don't think we have as much content, around that.
Precisely. Yeah, no, this is exactly where we need to start speaking. I mean, I've been beating this drum for Swagger and OpenAPI for so long, and we really suffer from echo chamber syndrome. We love getting up on the stage and stroking our egos and talking to people who get what we're saying, but going out of that and then creating content that goes out of that echo chamber, it doesn't exist on the scale it needs to exist. Well, I'm writing these ideas down. Let me keep working on them and come up with actionable things that we can do I really feel like this, similar to what's going on at Postman, is going to dovetail in important ways with the EDU efforts at the OpenAPI. So we have an EDU effort going at Postman. We have the education stuff going on at OAI. Demand gen is going to really be a part of that, because if we're going to increase the demand and awareness, we've got to have those resources, educational content, as well as blog posts and talks and webinars and other things that support that and works from a consistent pool. And ideally, we get the demand gen community, people building these tools here, to help contribute to that curriculum and content and own it in an open source way, and they can reuse that content in their talks and what they're doing, because that's another thing that's really bad in the space. And a lot of people come to me and go, hey, so and so is like took your material, took your content, and is kind of presenting it as their own, and they're like, doesn't that bother you? And I'm like, no, that's what my content is all about. That's what it's for. But it's still just my ranty content. It's not structured, organized content. And when we build this content that, like Kevin was talking about, it's got to be reusable, and it's got to be something that we encourage people. And then at this demand gen level, we actually drive partners to use, so that we're all on message and we're all saying the same things. And this illness is so bad across the API space, and I have to say, Swagger versus OpenAPI is the worst example of that out there. It's the poster child for this illness of we're a sector of reuse and interoperability, but when it comes down to actually reuse and interoperability at the design level and at the content level, we don't. So it's a problem.
You might have mentioned this, but is there like an OAI sanctioned place to collaborate around these ideas? I know you've got your Confluence and sort of Postman's Confluence, but is there something similar on the OAI side that's sort of not locked behind, some vendor wall?
Not that I'm aware of now. I mean, there's quite a few member channels that are pretty well. Once you join as a member, there's these paths, to the forum, to the Slack that you can participate in. But this is purposely outside of that firewall and meant to go further. So this GitHub repo is it for right now. And where this GitHub repo lives, whether it lives under Kinlane or I can put it under API Evangelist, I'd rather not put it under Postman, just because I want it to be more OAI led. We can put it in the OAI repo, but I'm going to use this GitHub repo as the central. I'm going to move what I have here on the Postman wiki onto here. I'm going to manage issues here. And then until it evolves into something wider, that's where I'm going to start the seed.
Great. I think you just answered my question. GitHub, Kinlane, OAI. Got it.
And possibly at some future date an OAI repo.
Yep. That'll probably be one of the next, before we build too much critical mass and get too many links going into this, that might make a lot of sense. So I'll push with you on that, Neil.
Okay.
So yeah, right now it's just Kinlane, OAI. The issues here's the ideas. I'll tweet that out after this meeting. I did record this, got to make sure the audio is going to work. I will publish that, and then I'll just start gathering, notes, ideas, centralize them here, and then as we can add other properties or other tools to facilitate communication, like I said, I'm probably going to set up a Twitter account that's just, and I'll coordinate with you on this as well, Neil. So it's an actual OAI property, not mine. But like a OAI demand gen or something. We'll come with a better name. That's a boring name. But something that is just about this amplification network. So I'll put together a plan on that, add it to the idea list here, create a kind of proposal, and then work with you, Neil, to maybe set that up, get that set up, and give me some control over it. And then that'll hopefully help start planting the seeds for getting the word out about this. But I'll use API Evangelist as kind of the getting the word out and getting this repo out into the conversation, and then just keep beating this drum every Friday until we get some more people coming. So cool.
All right.
That's all I got, you guys. So we'll give you 20 minutes of your life back, and we'll look to get some more people here next week, and I'll do 8 a.m. next week.
Cool. Thank you.
Thanks again.
Yeah, appreciate you
All
guys.
right.
Take
Take care.
Yeah,
Take
have,
care.
have a good
Bye.
weekend, guys.
You
You
too.
too. Bye.